Hello and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the fourth day of COP. I can't believe we've got this far already. And it's a very special welcome today to our sponsors for the day, Workiva, who have been the most wonderful partners enabling us to be here and present for the entire duration of COP. And so we're deeply grateful to them. Today is Finance Day at the Finance COP. That is what it has been billed as. And my goodness, we all know that money makes the world go round. And boy, do we ever feel that, particularly in the environmental space, because it is trying to access this finance, which is very much at the forefront of everyone's endeavors here at COP29 this year. The language of finance is very inaccessible to a lot of people. The message is incredibly important. The way the message is delivered is incredibly important. And whom it is delivered by is also incredibly important. We're human beings, we thrive on stories. And stories enable us to trust. And there is so much of that which is required when we are thinking about finance and mobilizing finance. We need to bring everybody along with us. So again, back to that language and how we use it, and enabling people to understand where the money is coming from, where it's going to, all the different flows that need to be considered. We also need to think about, as financial organizations and corporations, what we're doing within our own businesses and setups. Are we walking the walk as well as talking the talk? And are we empowering the change that needs to be seen as well within our own workforce, within our leadership communities as well? And talking of leadership, it just brings me back to Workiva today for their leadership in being here at COP and bringing not only their own voice to the table, but enabling and empowering other people to come and share their voices with us today. It is wonderful to see so many women speakers and some wonderful youth as well, contributing brilliantly to this vital discussion. So without further ado, it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome the Chief Sustainability Officer of Workiva to our stage, Mandy McReynolds. It is a delight and a pleasure.
Hello, hello. How's everyone doing so far with COP? Good? Okay, we've got one cheer from Mike over here. Well, thank you everyone for coming to Finance Day for us to unpack and redefine wealth. I'm Mandy McReynolds. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at Workiva. Workiva has 6,000 global customers. We serve 85% of the Fortune 500. And we look at how data and technology transformations can exist to combine both finance, risk, and sustainability together. And what an incredible day it is for us to look at how we step forward. Now, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I have to always talk to my daughter about what am I going to wear when I have to come to COP or other events. And the most important factor are my shoes. So if you notice, I like a little bit of spicy shoes, and so does she. And one of the things that we talk about is our choice of shoes can support our steps ahead, or it can knock us off our feet. As I think about COP29, I think this is an incredible way for us as leaders from all sectors to take a moment and pause and ask yourself this critical question. What shoes will you walk in over the next 5 years? Are they shoes that are really fit, so that we as a society together can look at the global economy and the transition we have ahead, that everyone can wear a shoe that fits them? That we can look at the negotiations happening at COP and the conversations around the globe and ask, are we really moving forward in an equitable space across all markets, particularly as we think about finance, innovation, and collaborative performance of both business and society? Today's sessions are going to be really fascinating, and anybody that knows me knows that I like to see sessions that not only are speakers talking at you, but they're actually speakers who are talking with you. So you're going to experience sessions that are lightning round conversations with breaks in between, or panelists where we pause for a moment and ask critical reflection questions. Why? Because the shoes that we wear to step into the next 5 years are critical, because over 15% of the UN SDGs are not on track. Because we know that the world is in a crisis as we think about the economic transition, the energy transition, and the climate transition ahead. It requires all of us to change the mind of how we're going to move forward with 3 fundamental steps ahead. First, trust. Well, we all know that trust cannot be formed unless we're willing to have radical and different conversations with one another. So that's why you'll see some diverse perspectives on today's stage, including one of my favorite, which is going to be about the great debate, the internal dialogue of debates that are happening inside the head of leaders, and also a great debate around how are we thinking about this externally as we dialogue and work together for private-public partnerships. So we have to think about the trust and the honesty in which we have these conversations and these dialogues in maybe some disagreements, both internally and externally. Second, we have to think about the accountability and leadership that we must all step forward to, acknowledging that we may, in imperfection, make mistakes. But we also have to progress forward together as a global society in order to be ready for all to progress together. And lastly, as we think about accountability leadership, think about this statistic. Most companies and practitioners, 2,000 practitioners around the world, ESG practitioners, those who work in environment, social, and governance for businesses, said that they don't feel like they're moving fast enough on their environment, social, and governance goals. 87% believe that the only way they can move faster is by having innovation. So we have an incredible way to step forward as a society and think differently about trust, about accountable leadership, and about innovation. So that together, when we hit 2030, we know as a society that we've made the incredible progress so that my 15-year-old daughter can say, we all walk together in the shoes that fit for us in the economy ahead. So who's ready to kick off with an incredible lightning conversation? Everybody ready? Okay. I am so thrilled with both looking at this incredible lineup that we have. I'm going to welcome these women to the stage. We have 3 incredible professional women in this lightning round series. Each are going to give a 5-minute powerful storytelling talk that talks about the acceleration of the climate transition. They're going to provide unique narratives that help us think about the empowerment of communities and the impact of fostering relationships to be meaningful. Now, oftentimes youth voices tend to, as we were talking earlier, be called the youth voices. Well, I'd like just to challenge that paradigm because each of these young women are key stakeholders. They're meaningful contributors. They are Gen Z, the now generation. And they are the professionals that are contributing to where we will go and step ahead into the next 5 years. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to each of our panelists because like incredible women, they can introduce themselves and have this powerful moment to teach each and every one of us. At the end, we'll also break and have some conversations within the audience and key questions. Without further ado, I will let them introduce themselves.
Greetings to you all. My name is Tafadzwa Kurotwi. I am a climate activist and humanitarian from Zimbabwe, representing She Changes Climate, where I'm advocating for gender, inclusion and diversity of women in climate spaces. I'm also the co-founder of Emerald Climate Hub, a youth-led organization that seeks to innovate sustainable solutions to climate change through innovation and technology. And I'm really honored to be here today and, giving me this opportunity to speak with my voice to this audience on what I'm experiencing back in my community from the Global South. And it's a great opportunity. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes. So I wanted to highlight a little bit on investment and climate finance. As young people, we are already driven to accelerate change in our communities. We already have, innovative minds that we're already doing. but we lack funding. We lack resources. We lack, the drive to continue our projects for us to be, for them to be scalable, for them to be bankable, and for them to be sustainable. So then how can we ensure that young people are not just, be ticked on the marking, register to say young people are there, but are we fully, meaningfully involved? Are we, there as young people representing our voices, speaking the truth on what is happening in our communities? So I'll tell you a little story about myself. In 2015, in Zimbabwe, we experienced what is called the El Nino drought. And we lived on a farm, so all the crops had gone. We had nothing at that time. Drought, we experienced this drought after 5 years. And that was the time that motivated me to say, despite what had happened to me, that there's drought in my community, I was not able to go to school because my father, we economically wise, that is where we got our funding for us to go back to school. And then I had a year where I was home without, going to school because my father had no fees to pay for me to go to, to continue with my education. And then that's when I realized, I cannot sit despite what had happened to me. I need to also influence other young people that, despite a story that you came from, you can also drive change. You can also influence other young people to take climate action. So what I did is I started advocating for what had happened to me to say, how can we now best, bring about solutions to what had happened in our community? How can I mobilize a lot of young people to speak about what is happening in their community, for other people to be inspired, and for other people to, take these young people, invest in them in terms of capacity building, knowledge, mentorship, and, programs for them to be able to speak the truth of what's happening in their community. And for the past 5 years, that was what I've been doing, mobilizing young people to take up space in their communities, to take us up space in their communities, in their in schools, universities, doing campaigns, a lot of stuff. But then the issue was, how can we now transition from where we've already talking about this, we're already experienced, but then how can we move forward? How can we say now we're talking about this, but how can we move forward? Now we talk of mentorship programs, we talk of investment, and we talk of financing and investment in young people. We need the finance. We need for you to invest because we're already stakeholders, but we need to accelerate that to ensure that we collaborate between the decision makers, the policy makers, the ones that are responsible, the private sector, the government, the NGOs, and bring along all of us because we cannot talk about young people when we're not there. We cannot bring solutions when we're not there. So nothing for us without us. Yes. So that was my message today, that we need to collaborate. We need to ensure that we invest and we also transform what we're about to bring as young people because we have the knowledge, we have the drive, and we are dedicated to move forward. We are not just here to sit and to say, they'll take it. No, we want to go with you. We want to be there. Where you are writing, we are also next to you. We also want to learn from you. So I think that's it in a nutshell to ensure that I hope my message is, we need more investment in young people to ensure that our projects are sustainable, are scalable, and also that they are bankable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that message. And also thank you to Extreme Hangouts, to Workiva for hosting this session, as well as everybody in the audience who decided to take time out of their trip at COP to think about what young people can bring to the table. I think I'm preaching a little bit to the choir, but I think that these are really important messages that I want to share with you all as you go back to your homes, your communities, your workplaces, and all of those other networks that you're a part of so that you can be part of the solution in championing youth, in stakeholders engagement, in corporations, and in climate action as a whole. So what I'll be telling you about today is the need for young people to have access to climate occupations. So I think we all understand that young people are important. There's a moral obligation to have young people at the table, like yes, yes, and yes. But I want to argue that there is a business case as well to have young people in these spaces and it will pay dividends for organizations in the global north, the developing world, and so much more. So I think everyone here is aware that climate is an enormous growing field. There's not really such thing as a climate industry, just as there's no such thing as like one economic industry, but rather it is a conglomeration of so many different sectors, and also a lot of cottage industries that are growing right now. So we think of things like the SBTIs, the CDPs, all these carbon accounting frameworks that we're starting to wrap our minds around. We're thinking of new developments in carbon dioxide removal, as well as renewable energy and power plant agreements and all these technical things that we haven't really mastered quite yet. And so I think that this is a huge opportunity to engage the new elements of the workforce and bring together their enthusiasm. In climate-related sectors such as agriculture, technology, we see a compound annual growth rate of 8% from 2023 to 2030. And so I think even with changes in politics and changes with the economic cycles, the booms and the busts, this is something that we have to invest in long term. And unfortunately, although a lot of green jobs are being posted, there's a mismatch between the jobs and the people who can hold them. And so that's what I want to talk about today as someone who is trying to enter the young professional space, who needs a job, and is currently a senior in college. I want to share a little bit about the other side of it. You guys might be hiring managers, you guys might be working as vice presidents, as leadership on your teams, and so maybe you don't have that sort of day-to-day interface with the people who are analysts, who are fixing that slide deck for you last minute. And so these are some of the challenges that I've faced in my specific experience, and I'm sure there are many more challenges that we have yet to even encounter and address as well. So the first that I want to talk about is the lack of a pipeline. I have yet to see really any entry-level sustainability analyst roles. And that's so unfortunate to me because I think what is happening is that we are having these like mid-level managerial roles in climate, and they're asking for like 5 years of experience. And you know that whole problem where you want experience, but how do you get experience? And so I think that's something that the climate movement is uniquely facing. However, I also think that there's a problem in the way that we identify what counts as experience, right? We would never penalize someone for going on maternity leave, even though maybe you're not contributing to the workforce in that moment, right? And so we understand that there's like a world in which you engage in outside of the workplace. And so I think if we can agree that that is true, then we can also agree that a lot of the engagements that you do outside of work are also experience as well, right? So I've been coming to COP for the past 4 years. And so I feel very frustrated after I was recently rejected from a job application. This is so embarrassing. I hope they're listening. And what they were saying was that, oh, we need 2 years of full-time postgraduate work experience. But going to COP, I think, is a unique experience that I can help contribute to their companies as well, because that was literally the role. And so I think that's one issue, the lack of a pipeline. But I'm not here just to complain about the problems that I'm facing. I wanted to outline a couple more that I've been seeing as well. I think, one, we all know that the climate as an industry is not diverse enough. The timeline for hiring is not fast enough. All of the best talent is getting captured 2 years in advance through other well-paying, high training jobs. And so we're getting that lack of talent going through our pipeline as well, even when these sustainability analysts open up, because it's often like a last-minute hire. And so you don't have the certainty that you can give if you're in a large corporation hiring 2 years in advance, converting someone from a summer internship. And finally, there's a lack of money. I think that's just a signal of how much we value people who are entry-level working on climate, and I think that has to change. But now for the business case, really quickly. So one, I think that youth fill in a unique gap. They're willing to learn. They're willing to better understand these sort of frameworks that we haven't had to navigate before, and they don't come with these sort of predisposed notions of what should be. Additionally, I think diversity in and of itself is good. We care about diversity in terms of women in boards and people of color, but we should also care about intergenerational diversity because it leads to creativity and perspective. And additionally, young people grew up in a completely different environment of technology, of innovation. A lot of the startups that have disrupted our industries like like social media, like artificial intelligence, are from people who are maybe not 40 years down the line, right? And I think we want to harness that more in the climate space as well. And so I think that those are some of the key reasons that I would ask you to bring back to your communities in order to better consider how we can integrate young people into the workforce. Because when you invest in those people, you retain them. At a point in which we're currently spending maybe 2 to 4 years at one job, this can actually create dividends and keep loyalty within your organization. And finally, I want to end on the note that young people are already doing lots of really good work. They are staying up at 2 a.m. when the deals are about to close. You trust them to make sure that those decks are ready to go. You trust them to give keynotes and things like this. And so I don't know why you wouldn't trust them to also be part of your organizations as well. So food for thought. Thank you.
Hi to everyone. Thank you so much for such a great speech, and it was very inspiring to hear your insights and your experiences. My name is Sarah, and I welcome you to Azerbaijan. It's a very great honor for us to see all of you here, and thanks for your time to come to this session. I'm a social entrepreneur and a business psychologist from Azerbaijan. In 2017, I founded Buta Art and Sweets social enterprise, which is employing local women with mental and physical disabilities. We are producing the first in the market, in the local market, gluten-free, sugar-free, and also vegan food products for our local audience. So when I was researching the statistics about the amount of women with disabilities in Azerbaijan, that was very interesting for me to know that there are more than 500,000 women with disabilities in Azerbaijan, and in 2017, more than 90% of them were unemployed. These statistics actually shocked me in a negative way, and I decided just to go in 2 ways. I had 2 choices: to blame government for everything, for these high unemployment rates for these people from underprivileged communities, or to take some actions without expecting some grants or investment from donors, from governments, and so on. And I decided to choose social entrepreneurship way because for me it was more close to my own values, that when I'm creating some social impact for local communities, I don't want to depend on donors, I don't want to depend on grants, so we will invest, we will generate the resources through sales of our own products. So now we are employing 20 women with disabilities, with different mental and physical disabilities in Azerbaijan. And also during COVID crisis, we decided to change our strategy when we had experienced a huge emotional and also physical crisis in our business model. We decided to transform our venue to vegan one, and we decided also to change our packaging strategy, and we developed the green mindset in our communication and leadership as well. So Buta Art and Sweets created a cult of social entrepreneurship movement in Azerbaijan, and thanks to our team, which advocated for a long time for bringing social entrepreneurship mindset in Azerbaijan, we could have a direct impact on more than 1 million people in Azerbaijan. And for the first time, the government of Azerbaijan decided to include social entrepreneurship concept in the local legislation. So for us, it was very important not to consider our women in our team as beneficiaries, but rather than key stakeholders, because in most of the social initiatives in Azerbaijan, especially which has been implemented by different organizations, local and international, we have been seeing that the people from underprivileged communities, they have been feeling with the hearted feelings, of dignity. They have been feeling as a part, as actresses or actors of one theater show, just to show that someone is caring about the problems. And instead of bringing this mindset to those people, we decided to change the concept from beneficiaries to key stakeholders, where these people wouldn't be as beneficiaries of our projects, but they would be the key stakeholders in terms of bringing some value and contributing their own potential for developing not only our business model, but also the communities in Azerbaijan. So what have been the main lessons we have been learning from social entrepreneurship journey in our experience? Firstly, it's very necessary to develop system thinking. Sometimes we are thing is that we are knowing a lot about the problems we are experiencing in our communities. Sometimes we want to solve these problems, but sometimes the solutions can harm more local communities rather to solve the main roots of this problem. Secondly, it's necessary not only to work with these key stakeholders, but also with the main influential people who are directly influencing on the decision-making process in the daily lives. It was very hard for us, firstly, to work with the women with disabilities in Azerbaijan, because sometimes their husbands, their sons, their brothers didn't allow us to work with those women. So for us, it was also very important to think in a systematic way in order to support those women as well. And thirdly, it was very important for us to get these lessons learned, especially from COVID crisis, that if we want to have a mindful leadership, we need to adapt our communication and leadership to each value system of our team members. When we are delivering some communication in a single way to all our stakeholders, to all our team members, sometimes because of the difference of the perception of the reality, perception of the leadership, perception of climate change, perception of sustainability, sometimes there can be some mismatches in our communication and also in our leadership. So we decided to use ego development theories in our capacity building programs for our social entrepreneurship in order to achieve this mindful and conscious leadership, not only for our business model, but for the whole country as well. Thank you so much for your listening, and it was a great honor for us to see you here. Thank you.
Thank you all for just a remarkable lightning round. So we're going to take a pause, and I want you to think, if you could ask any of these young women who are professional, who are really leading the way around the globe, what they would change or what advice they would have for you, what one question would you ask? Go ahead and turn to the person next to you and tell them what question you're most curious about. All right, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and now we're going to flip it a little bit. What was a question from a partner or person that you were talking to that you thought was interesting? So you can say what the person next to you thought. Anybody have an interesting question? Right here, let's go in here from the audience.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Thomas from Germany. We had a little small talk before, and we don't question our rules. So capitalism, economy growth, it is not questioned at all. And I like to ask the question, what is needed to question this kind of rules, and what are the main facts all humans need to know about the change and the world which we dream for the future. 3 main facts.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, yesterday when I was reading the news from COP29, it was also fascinating for me to read that for the first time in the history of COP29, there have been also interest, a huge focus on inner development goals. So instead of only focusing on sustainable development goals, already on the international level, we started to focus on inner development goals, as we discussed earlier, that it's so important to work on our values, on our behaviors, on our choices, and also the most importantly, on our ego maturity, because climate change and sustainability, it's all related with our mindset and with our ego maturity. So how we can also change these issues in the systematic way, I think it comes from education. So when we can adapt these ego development theories, when we are learning about different value systems of perception of sustainability, climate change as well, when we are developing system thinking as a necessary skill for cultivating responsible and mature people, I think this issue will be solved in a more systematic way. So I think it all comes from the education. As in your history of Germany, it was also some concepts of Bildung education, which was also forming the culture of cultivating of people with a higher moral values. They have been thinking about the philosophy of environmental protection, about giving back to the planet, to the environment, to the people. So we need to go back to our history to take very important lessons from our history and to adapt to the current reality as well. So I think it all comes from changing the system of education. Thank you.
I'm curious from our lightning round talks, as you listen to one another, what's a question you have for one another?
I think my question to both of them is, how can we best learn from each other for collaboration? Because I know the climate crisis affects us differently from where you come from and from where I come from. But how then can we foster that partnership and collaboration to ensure that, knowledge sharing, what you're experiencing, what I'm experiencing, how can we collaborate to ensure we bring about, solutions to it? That would be my question.
Thanks so much. I love this turning of like the mic around, asking questions from all over. I think a couple of things come to mind when you were asking that question, so I can start off, but very interested to hear you two's thoughts as well. In terms of collaboration, I think one systematic structure that I find really troubling, especially when working with young people in climate, is that there is just so few resources that it always feels almost sort of competitive at times. And I don't know if this is an undercurrent that you all have felt as well, but I think that comes from a lot of the elevation of youth as social media influencers or through grant programs in which you are almost directly compared to each other in that sort of a dynamic. And so I think that is an antagonistic structure that I would like to see overall change. In terms of more community-facing approaches, I think one of the biggest things I get from COP is maybe not following the negotiations. I think ultimately I'll see a lot of the speeches live stream, things like that. What I find is the community and being able to connect with other young people to have that sort of conversation and being open about what has worked and what has not, but also having humility and understanding what worked in my context might not work in yours. And so I think culturally I would love to see more of the movement becoming more open to sharing how did I get this to happen, and even modeling maybe some of the partnerships that I see coming from more of the business sector, because I think they get a lot of stuff done here obviously as well. And so I think that there's a lot to learn, and not all of the practices that they're doing are awful and things like that. And so having that sort of partnership at a young person to young person level, but also with mentors, businesses who can help capacity build and upskill, will allow us to have that sort of knowledge transfer that's really important for our growth.
I would like to add, thank you so much for such a great question. I think in terms of partnership, especially between different countries for the same goals, it's very necessary to learn about the psychology of local communities, about the cultural codes, about written and unwritten rules of communication in order to adapt something new, innovations in our organizations, in terms of our initiatives, much more easy way to the local communities, because local communities in most of cases they can resist to some innovations, but when we can find the language of communications and adapting our communication to different cultural codes and value systems in different countries, it becomes much more easier. So for me, the answer is in psychology and learning the cultural codes.
Turning it back to the audience for a question. Another question? Right over here. Thank you.
That? I'll just. Yeah.
Now it's working.
I'm Michaela from New Zealand. Perfect. My question is, I heard once a couple of years ago that one of the main things that you can do for climate is empower women, and I'm curious to hear your perspectives on how we can get that better placed on the agenda to ensure that more women are heard, I guess, in the negotiations and in the discussions in general.
I think I would love to answer that. So, it's a very interesting topic of how women are being represented at, decision-making levels. But how can we ensure that more women are there? Because it seems like it's a men's world. But we're already screaming to say we want more women. We also want to be part of the solution. So to me would be, we need to come together as women. Because it seems as if we are fighting each other. But we need to come together to say, you know what, this is what we want as women. Not only as as you know, to be there, but to be meaningfully, to be on those leadership positions, to ensure that we come together as women with one voice. We come together collectively to say, you know what, enough is enough. We also need more women on the table, because you cannot talk about women, or we cannot talk about, you know, adaptation fund for women when we are not even there to see how it's being managed, how it's being done, when we're not on the decision-making table. So that would be my answer.
Maybe I can jump onto that. I think that's super salient, especially with a lot of the governance of COP29 here. And I think also I'll totally agree with everything that's been said. But also I think there's a data gap in sort of quantifying the impacts of climate change on women. I think generally we are aware that climate change disproportionately impacts women, but it's, I think, less clear to the average person what are the specific routes in which that happens, and to what percent does that happen, right? So like when I first told someone that, they were like, oh, but like hurricanes hit everyone, which is totally true, right? Like there's no natural disasters or like sea level rise that is specifically targeted at a gender. But I think what we see is that the social norms make it so that women are usually the ones who are bearing far more of the brunt in terms of unpaid labor, like childcare, as well as managing the household, etc. And when you have sustainable development, when you have things like access to financial capital with things like savings accounts that are independent of men's, etc., I think that helps for empowerment. But ultimately, it's hard to make that case without having better data around what exactly the degree of that impact is. And I think that lack of data is maybe sort of indicative of people's priorities on the issue of women in the climate space already.
So as we close out, one final question that we have. Our company is really interesting because the average age is actually under the age of 35. And so I think it's a fascinating piece to think about, how do we think of innovation in the future, whether it's innovation in finance, innovation as a founder of social entrepreneurship, innovation as we think about the future workforce, and as you articulated so well, taking and adapting new frameworks like carbon accounting and really stepping forward with that. As you think about the rest of us looking forward and engaging you as key stakeholders, what is, in one word, your one word for what everyone here should walk away and think about as they head to COP30 next year?
My one word would be equity.
I like the question. I'm going to say women.
I would tell healthy mindset.
And what about you?
What about me? Action. Action. Good. Well, thank you all for joining this inspiring kickoff that we have. We have programming throughout the rest of the day, including the great debate about the internal debate in our mind, the second great debate about the internal debate that's happening around us, and a final panel today. So we look forward to having you back here, and thank you to our incredible key stakeholders for challenging our thinking as we think about finance innovation, the future of our workforce, and social entrepreneurship, and how it will drive us all forward as we step ahead towards 2030.